All right, guys, looks like I am live. Welcome. If anybody is out there, I know I'm starting late today. Unfortunately, I forgot to say something yesterday that I had an appointment with my wife, or she had an appointment with the midwives. So, just got home about 45 minutes ago and got the stream started. So, hopefully, some of you guys will pour in here in a few minutes. Until that time, some interesting things going on right now are or sorry, I should say, is a hearing going on at the moment over the insurrection of January 6th. So I have that playing right here from Reuters. Uh, let's look at that before we get into some stuff.
Capitol Hill Police here today, like we wanted. Oh, it's interesting, too, the response
No worries,
that
Holly.
the Attorney General gave to Mr. Meadows.
Appreciate you being here.
When he sent that email.
Even if I started
interesting.
late without telling folks.
He says, I can't believe this. I'm not going to respond to the message below. Wow. Wow, that is a problem. When the Chief of Staff to the President of the United States asks someone in the executive branch to do, and they basically give him the finger, I think that's the problem we should be looking into, but that's not.
So a few minutes ago, Representative Connolly of Virginia just spoke about there needing to be, he wanted 500 arrests and 500 more for anyone who did this travesty, and how the Republicans keep obfuscating this topic with other things. And of course, Jim Jordan came on right afterwards, and he is now ranting about how that this is absurd and ridiculous. We have an inflation problem. We have a border problem. We have all these things going on. And we're sitting here trying to analyze this. And the leaders, the people who are we're talking to.
So.
Sorry, I don't know why that keeps going on. Let's see. Who are we talking to? We're talking to General Flynn's brother, General Charles Flynn, and the FBI Director, Christopher Wray. They aren't even aware, if you had been watching this at all, of the number of people who are in solitary confinement right now. They aren't aware of how many people were actually in the Capitol building. They don't know. These are the leaders, supposedly. I keep telling you guys that we have no real leadership anymore. This is 100% absolutely true. There is no leadership in Washington, D.C. In fact, the only major leader I see today in this world is, in our nation, is probably Ron DeSantis. It's just, I mean, Jim Jordan's pretty good. I like him. There's a couple of the Republicans I like. He's bringing up hard-hitting questions here. I know I have the volume turned down right now, guys, so that's so I can talk. But again, let's watch just a couple more minutes of this and just see what's going on here. And what when I started watching this when I got home, what I noticed was that a lot of the Republicans were focusing on the ineptitude of the police services, the Capitol Police. They don't even have the Capitol Police Chief there or anyone who's in charge of the security of the Capitol building. Not there. They declined to come. I don't know why they weren't subpoenaed, but I guess this is just a hearing and they can't quite do so. By the way, I like this ratio too. We got 95 to, it says 84 to 62, but whatever. 95 to 65, and people are still coming in and watching.
Here right now, but we are very focused on the interplay between.
Hey, Doll Huck, haven't seen you in a while, bud.
Types of, as you said, non-state actors overseas and domestic terrorists here in the United States.
On January 14th, Yahoo News
and Shelley, I see you're there too.
On the issue of DVE funding from a company called Chainalysis. According to this report, 1 month before January 6th, a French donor, quote, lamenting the decline of Western civilization, close quote, sent approximately $250,000 in Bitcoin to an individual named Nick Fuentes. Why Nick Fuentes? Nick Fuentes, who's been suspended from YouTube for hate speech, is the self-proclaimed leader of the group Groypers, a white supremacist group opposed to immigration and minorities. The Anti-Defamation League confirmed that many of Groyper's members were at the Capitol on January 6th, including Nick Fuentes himself. Here's a picture of Mr. Fuentes from his Twitter account on that day, the circle is around Mr.
So now exactly why I say you don't go to these things, right? Now they're demonizing Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes, who, you know, I don't really watch or listen to. I don't really take the guy too seriously, but yes, Nick Fuentes, he's the evil insurrectionist, and he got money from Bitcoin in his account, and now he's on the no-fly list because, well, he was outside the Capitol. No due process.
This particular transaction involving Nick Fuentes. Sir, you can't rule out that other far-right extremist groups received foreign donations in the lead up to January.
Not only would I not want to rule it out.
Guys, is the stream still running? Because I have a error message. Maybe because this video is running live, so I guess I will just shut it down. So, in any case, if you guys didn't know that this was going on today, that's something of interest, at least to me, and how they're going to handle this. And it's obviously quite partisan. Again, he's sitting there going after a freaking YouTuber. Yes. Yes, as in what I'm discussing, another a-hole, or because or the stream is in error, because it looks like it's running for me. I can't tell. Check on DLive real quick. Seems to be running on entropy. All right. You were late yesterday, Dollhawk? Yeah, no worries, man. I mean, I'm late today. I had to start an hour late because I was out of town, as I said in the beginning here. But because of that, guys, as well, I'm probably going to keep today kind of brief, and we're just going to cover the things that that this is the stream is for, that I've been doing, and that is the politics of obedience, and also we'll read some more of The Naked Communist, and I'll probably take a little break, and maybe we'll play some more of the what is that? The Jesus of Testimony. But most likely, guys, I will be done by 5:30 today, so it'll be a shorter stream than I have been doing. Okay. Thanks, bud, for letting me know that it's working. Yeah, it looks like it's working, but YouTube Studios says I have an error message, so and I'm a little concerned that restreaming Reuters like that, they might put a copyright strike on me. It's stupid if they did, but which means I'll have to come back in and then cut it. Like I had to the other week for nonsensical reasons. By the way, guys, if you didn't know, Yiz was in here yesterday in the chat, and I was on her stream yesterday talking about her Dragon of Discord show. Yiz is pretty much giving up on YouTube because she's been hit really hard over there. So make sure you're following her if you like Yiz over on DLive or on Odyssey. I didn't realize Odyssey had streaming services now for everybody, but apparently they do. So I'll probably start doing that myself here soon as well, although I'm generally in less trouble with YouTube. Unless I start talking about the coof. That's about the only reason why I've been in trouble. So anyways, let's get into the content. And sorry, guys, if I'm all over the place today. Like I said, I just got home a little bit ago. Just ate. And I'm tired. I'm tired because, you know what? As usual, I don't sleep. All right, so this is about where we left off in the politics of obedience. It says, by this time, it should be evident that liberty, once lost, valor also perishes. A subject... Sorry, guys, I'm trying to adjust my stuff here around real quick. A subject people shows neither gladness nor eagerness in combat. Its men march suddenly to danger, almost as if in bonds. And... stultified, they do not feel throbbing within them and the eagerness of liberty, which engenders scorn of peril and imparts readiness to acquire honor and glory by the brave death amidst one's comrades. Now, I'm pretty sure when I left this off last week, that would have been Tuesday, since I didn't stream on here the rest of the week, we reread some of this, but again, just to rehash it, I completely agree with this. Liberty is hard It's not a natural state. The natural state is actually servitude. It's unfortunate, but it is because, people tend to idolize other men or women and prop them up as some sort of omnipotent God being, and that will solve all their problems and whatever else. And this is something I reject. So the state of gaining liberty is something that must be fought for one way or another. Now, I want to fight this on a level of ideas and a local level, grassroots. I'm not trying to scale up to the federal government, although I think it's important that given certain opportunities that we, try to work to get the federal government back. But it's so far gone, guys. It's just not really going to happen. So we need to focus on liberty locally, as I'm often saying. But I don't want a fist fight or a gun battle or any of those horrible things. And I'm telling you right now, if you guys think that that's some sort of have romantic notions about that, you're just utterly wrong, and you don't quite understand the horrors of war. It's not good, guys. It is not easy for people to have to justify why they've killed other men and to live with those things. And not to mention all the other horrors that go along with war, watching folks die, losing family members, children. There's a high price. There's also a high price, though, to being enslaved. So, again, this is kind of his point here, that freedom and liberty, fighting for that, makes men and women more brave and willing to fight instead of a slave, someone recruited, like in Vietnam, let's say, where they drafted men to go out to a war, men who didn't want to fight in that war. It says, among free men, there is competition as to who will do most. Each for the common good, each by himself, all expecting to share in the misfortunes of defeat or in the benefits of victory. But an enslaved people loses, in addition to its warlike courage, all signs of enthusiasm, for their hearts are degraded, submissive, and incapable of any great deed. And this is why, folks, we have the sheeple in the world. We have the people that watch the MSNs and the CNNs and the ABCs and the CBSs, and they just nod their heads along and drool and agree with what they're being told and never investigating it any further. Tyrants are well aware of this, and in order to degrade their subjects further, encourage them to assume this attitude and make it instinctive. Xenophon, grave historian of the first ranks among the Greeks, wrote a book in which he makes Simonides speak with Heron, tyrant of Syracuse. Concerning the anxieties of the tyrant, this book is full of fine and serious remonstrances. Remonstrances? I don't know this. I hate when I'm trying to read to you guys. I'm coming across words I don't know. And I'm pretty well read. So, it happens, right?
Remonstrance.
Remonstrance. A forceful reproach, a protest. I'm going to assume this is not in usage very much anymore. Oh, it doesn't show me a little chart. Anyways. But yes, tyrants certainly love the submissiveness of the people, and it's what they expect, and it's why, we have people with blind faith believing that, all of a sudden we just had 30 million new registered voters this past year, and Joe Biden's the most popular president ever. And maybe all those things are true. Maybe that did happen. But I need to see the evidence because I have questions. Would to God that all despots have, it says remonstrances, which in my opinion are a persuasive as words can be. Would to God that all despots who have ever lived might have kept it before their eyes and use it as a mirror. I cannot believe they would have failed to recognize their warts and to have convenienced some shame for their blotches. Man, I am not in good shape to be reading today, guys. In this treatise is explained the torment in which tyrants find themselves when obliged to fear everyone because they do evil unto every man. Among other things, we find the statement that bad kings employ foreigners in their wars and pay them, not daring to entrust weapons in the hands of their own peoples, whom they have wronged. You know, this is an important point too. Don talks about this quite often. I shouldn't say often, but when it gets brought up, I know I asked him over on the Justify the Memes when he was on. This happened in the Soviet Union. Soldiers from different areas, say, if I took soldiers from Detroit and brought them down here to West Virginia, they don't care about the people down here. But soldiers in West Virginia would be maybe a little bit more reticent to use force against the population that is kin to them, right? And so in the Soviet Union, we had this, and they had to move people around, and it's not an uncommon thing to hear about. People tend to not want to do violence to those that are, related to them in some manner or another, whether it be, the community or neighborhood or your state or whatever. It gets a lot easier when you see them as another. And in fact, this is one of the means in which the military uses to basically facilitate killing, as they other folks. There have been good kings who have used mercenaries for foreign nations, even among the French, although more so formally than today, but with the quite different purpose of preserving their own people, considering as nothing the loss of money in an effort to spare French lives. That is, I believe that Scipio, the great African, meant that he said, he said he would rather save one citizen than defeat 100 enemies. For it is plainly evident that the director does not consider his power firmly established until he has reached the point where there is no man under him who is of any worth. Therefore, there may be justly applied to him the reproach to the master of the elephants made by Thorasan and reported by Terence. So again, with the foreign mercenaries, if you would, this was really common back in the day. And in fact, in the United States, we used them quite often. We were never supposed to have a standing military. Now, the military became a standing army, but it has to be refunded every year and authorized every year by Congress. This was not the intent of the founders, though. They wanted a citizen militia because they knew that the citizens would not use force against their own people. So you have to understand this logical line of thinking. And this, again, folks, if you do not recall, was written in the 1570s. Are you indeed so proud because you command wild beasts? This method tyrants use to stultifying their subjects cannot be more clearly observed than in what Cyrus did with the Lydians after he had taken Sardis, their chief city, and had at his mercy the captured Croesus, their fabulous rich king. Again, he's talking about ancient Greek history, stuff that, we don't learn anymore today, which is why we're so screwed up, because we just decided to throw everything out from the last, 4 millennia of recorded history. At least that's part of the reason why we're screwed up. When news was brought to him that the people of Sardis had rebelled, it would have been easy for him to reduce them by force. But being unwilling either to sack such a fine city or to maintain an army there to police it, he thought of an unusual expedient for reducing it. He established in it brothels, taverns, and public games. They issued the proclamation that the inhabitants were to enjoy them. Cakes and circuses, folks. Cakes and circuses. What do you think sports ball is all about? And I know you guys might say, but Bill, you watch the UFC. I do. It's one day of my week. I don't spend time following fighters, really. I also have been a martial artist since I was 10 years old. So it's kind of like a hobby of mine, as well as it's educational. And I'm actually a weirdly gifted person in this, that I can actually watch stuff and pick up the technique without ever even having to apply it. I'm very gifted in that, fortunately. It's one of my strengths, as opposed to all the other million weaknesses that I have. He found this type of garrison so effective that he never again had to draw the sword against the Lydians. These wretched people enjoyed themselves inventing all kinds of games, so that the Latins have derived the word from them, and what we call pastimes have they called ludi, as if they were meant to say lidi. Not all tyrants have manifested so clearly their intentions to effeminize their victims. But in fact, that's interesting, he uses that word. In fact, that the aforementioned deposit publicly proclaimed and put into effort, most of the others have pursued secretly as an end. It is indeed the nature of the populace, whose density is always greater in the cities, to be suspicious towards one who has their welfare at heart, and gullible towards one who fools them. So again, this is ancient, guys. The city versus the countryside. It is repeated over and over again as you read. I'm telling you that there is nothing new under the sun, generally speaking. Humanity's just playing out the same game over and over again, and we are being infantilized now and feminized in our society, which makes a weak society. And that's exactly what he's talking about here. Do not imagine there is any bird more easily caught by decoy, nor any fish sooner fixed on the hook by wormy bait, than are all those poor fools neatly tricked into servitude by the slightest feather passed, so to speak, before their mouths. Truly, it is a marvelous thing that they let themselves be caught so quickly at the slightest tickling of their fancy. Plays, farces, spectacles, gladiators, strange beasts, medals, pictures, and other such opiates. These were for ancient peoples the bait towards slavery, the price of their liberty, and the instrument of tyrants. It's interesting. These are good choice words here, and he calls it an opiate. You know, the famous Karl Marx, that religion's the opiate of the masses. No, these things are. These things, the things you waste your time on, the Facebooks, right? The Twitters. I mean, I get a lot of, not a ton, but I get a lot of crap from, my streaming friends who are on the Twitter or in Don's server, that kind of thing. I haven't even checked in Don's server in a while, actually, and I probably should. But, or the Discord, I get in there and steal memes, but that's about it. I don't interact a lot on that because I spent so much time in the past doing it, and I realized what a time suck it truly is. I need to be more productive. I need to be doing things. I need to produce this show, The Ends Justify the Memes. I need to take care of my wife and my daughter. I need to cook dinner. There are things around the house that need fixed sometimes, right? And of course, I'm writing a novel, so I don't need to waste my time on those things. And I'm not saying that they aren't useful tools to some degree. I actually got into Facebook to follow one friend of mine who lived across the country in California, and found it to be a good news aggregate originally. And then they started changing the algorithms. Then I started getting into forums and all that and chatting with people, and I wasted hours doing so. And it's good to talk to people, and I made friends that way. I literally do have friends from across the states that I stay in touch with from certain forums and groups I was on. But again, what was I actually producing? What was actually created? And again, I got on Facebook just to follow a friend because he convinced me to. He said it was the easiest way to do it or to keep in touch with him. And I thought Facebook was stupid before that. I never would have gotten it. I mean, I thought Twitter was stupid forever. I still do. But I have a Twitter, but mostly for communication or maybe news stuff on occasion. I understand the purpose of these things, but most people are too easily distracted and probably should just get off of them completely. And of course, I do know some people that have done that. By these practices and enticements, the ancient dictators so successfully lulled their subjects under the yoke that the stupefied peoples, fascinated by the pastimes and vain pleasures flashed before their eyes, learned subservience as naively, but not so credibly, as little children learn to read by looking at bright picture books. So if you guys didn't know, they had bright picture books back in the 1500s in France. Now you know. And again, guys, I've never read this paper before. If you didn't catch that, but I've mentioned it before as we've been reading this. So it is a joy for me to read things that are new, that are so old, especially, that speak directly to my heart on liberty and politics. Roman tyrants invented a further refinement. They often provided the city wards with feasts to cajole the rabbit, always more readily tempted by the pleasures of eating than by anything else. The most intelligent and understanding amongst them would not have quit his soup bowl to recover the liberty of the Republic of Plato. Let me read that again. The most intelligent and understanding among them would not have quit his soup bowl to recover the liberty of the Republic of Plato. I don't know quite what he means by that, because Plato's Republic was a tyranny. But maybe that's the point he's making. He's being facetious, right? Tyrants would distribute Legres a bushel of wheat, a gallon of wine, and a cester, I guess. And then everybody would shamelessly cry, "Long live the king!" That's right. Because when someone basically promises you free stuff, you vote for them, don't you? Maybe not you guys, probably not you guys, but we know that this is a tendency, a habit. Holly says, social media is harder on girls and women, unrealistic beauty standards, unrealistic family life relations, and then the anti-men rhetoric is intoxicating. Yeah, man, true that, but all of those things are things that women put onto other women, or gay men put onto other women, at least as far as unrealistic beauty standards. Because men don't care. Like, ladies, very few men are all into all the other things. Let me do something real quick, guys. I just got whoa. All right, are we back? Sorry, folks. I don't know why my stream just shut down on there. I don't know if it stopped streaming or not, but I'm gonna have to pull up everything else here in a minute. I was trying to turn off a notification. I don't know where it even came from. On Discord. because all my stuff should be muted, but I just got a Discord alert. I haven't joined any new servers. Very interesting. Sorry, guys. Holly said absolutely 100%. Everything looks good. Sorry, I sent you a Discord for tomorrow. Oh, that's fine, Holly. If it's you, it's fine. I just don't want the notifications going off while I'm trying to talk, and it's just a personal thing of mine. But yeah, guys, I accidentally, for some reason, closed down the stream. So it's good if it's still running. This is Bill on little sleep when he gets up early. I did get to bed before, like, I don't know. I guess I was in bed by 3 last night, or sleep. Slept on the couch, because sometimes that is better for me than sleeping in bed with my wife, because I am a light sleeper. Let me get DLive back up. And Entropy. So that if anyone's over there, I can check on that. And speaking of which, guys, in case you didn't know, I have a DLive and an Entropy. It's in the links in the description. Now, I know most of you here right now know this, but, if I don't say it, someone else will not know it. So those are the ways that you can donate to if you are so inclined. And as I always say, more importantly, though, please like, share, subscribe, the thing. Let's see here. All right. Anyways, so sorry about all of this. I am obviously very good at this. All right, let's get back to where we were at. The fools did not realize that they were merely recovering a portion of their own property, and that their ruler could not have given them what they were receiving without having first taken it from them. A man might one day be presented with a sesterce and gorge himself. Now, see, I got to look that up too now. Sesterce, an ancient Roman coin. Oh, okay. Like an equal unit of 1/4 of a denars. Now I know. It's money! By the way, Holly, chances are stream will continue tomorrow. I know I was talking a lot about my wife's due date yesterday. Midwives were saying that essentially 10 days after the due date is the typical time for women to go into labor. So it should be good for at least another week. And Fiona's not quite in position yet. I mean, she's head down and all that stuff, but she's not quite made her way fully into the pelvis and all that good stuff. So we'll see. We'll see. So let's read this again. A man might one day be presented with a sesterce and gorge himself at the public feast, lauding Tiberius and Nero for handsome liberalities. Okay. So some of the language in this, guys, some of the words are just confusing to me. I apologize. That is the dyslexia in action, because literally I've had to learn over my life to read primarily through rote. Phonics do not work for me. Who on the morrow would be forced to abandon his property to their avarice, his children to their lust, his very blood to the cruelty of these magnificent emperors without offering any more resistance than a stone or a tree stump. The mob has always behaved in a way eagerly open to bribe that cannot be honorably accepted, or to bribes that cannot be honorably accepted, and dissolutely callous to degradation and insult that cannot be honorably endured. Nowadays, I do not meet anyone who, on hearing mention of Nero, does not shudder at the very name of that hideous monster, that disgusting and vile pestilence. Yet when he died, when this incendiary, this executioner, this savage beast died, as vilely as he lived, the noble Roman people, mindful of his games and his festivals, were saddened to the point of wearing mourning for himself. This actually happened too with Commodus, Marcus Aurelius' son. Marcus Aurelius was a great emperor, actually, aside from him, murdering some Christians. But he was a really good Roman emperor. He was very well liked, and Commodus was not. This is largely the character based on Gladiator, the movie Gladiator. And Commodus actually did go fight in a gladiatorial fight. So, Thane said, that's how I learned to read. I cannot sound out a new word at all. Yeah, I kind of can do phonics a little bit. This is actually how I discovered that I was dyslexic. It was because my parents, well, basically my second grade school teacher put me in the lowest reading level. She was a horrible person to me directly. Told me I was stupid and an idiot. Like, literally, my parents didn't know this. They actually knew her personally. And I always had to stay, in third grade, I always had to stay in for recess because I was always behind on my work. And it wasn't until I got in the fourth grade that my teacher kind of, advanced me in the reading class. And I had to work really hard by rote to pass spelling test. Fortunately, I have a pretty good memory. But yeah, my parents got me hooked on phonics back in the day, back in the late 80s or early 90s, and I hated it. And I was like, I can read, I'm not stupid. It made me feel really, really bad. And then my dad started making me do it and wanted to read along with me, and he realized what I was doing. He didn't know it was dyslexia initially, but that's what I was doing was my brain and eyes want to jump along all around the screen in words. And then phonics are hard for dyslexics to distinguish. So, but I don't consider it a disability. I think it's, it's 30% of the population have some form of dyslexia, depending on how severe it is. And so I just think it's a different way of perceiving things. I don't know how you can call something that is a third of the population a disability. But I that's why I always say I'm a big picture guy, because that's kind of what dyslexia does. And also it's really useful for speed reading, although you tend to fill in gaps sometimes of things that aren't there. So anyways, just a little backstory there. Did they make you use those color overlays also? No, I never did anything like that, man. I mean, I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. There wasn't a lot of support for that kind of stuff. Now, interestingly, I couldn't read, but I was in an advanced math class. So, and we were doing statistics and fractions and all kinds of stuff that kids were not doing at that age and level. And I didn't, that was all based on state testing. But I learned to read essentially through reading magazines and comic books. No joke. Because it's brief, it's snippets, Yeah, Shelley, it's as you said, my 11-year-old was diagnosed with ADHD at 3 different visits. The psychologist said they cannot test for dyslexia, just terrible spelling and refuses to sound out words. I'm telling you, it's really hard to get a diagnosis for dyslexia, and what they'll tell you often. I remember dealing with this with my daughter and her school teachers, and they'd be like, well, it's too early to tell. No, it's not. It's not. And I know that she's also dyslexic because she has the same issues, and it seems to run in my family. My dad has it, and my one of my nephews, and he has a diagnosis. So they tend to excuse it or explain it away or whatever. But I don't think I'm super bad, but forever I had like I couldn't read street signs. Even now, if I read a street sign, if it's a number or something, I'll reverse it. Happens a lot. All this describes me. Every teacher thought I was dumb. Yeah, man, it's hard. It's harsh. Um, and I'm not about to like prop up my IQ or anything, but I'm a pretty high IQ guy. I'm not like I'm nowhere a genius level, but um, I know what the IQ numbers are in members of my family. So given the literature that I understand, I should be within their range. And then some of my family believes that I'm, smarter than they are, at least in that aspect, however you want to put it. So, but again, we kind of talked about this on Yiz's show last night, or Aiden did. IQ is not a determinant of anything, though, per se. My wife's father is a genius, and he does have a genius level IQ, and he's not lived a very good life, and he's, a regular kind of working class guy, hasn't done anything very productive, and whatever else. All your uncles have it? Yeah, man. Yeah. So it is hard to get a diagnosis, though. It is very hard. But if you do the research on dyslexia and what it is and how it works, it's pretty easy to tell if you have it or not. It's not that difficult. Anyways, sorry to get off on that tangent, guys. This is a rabbit hole show today, I guess. We're just going to keep going that way. Okay. Thus wrote Cornelius Tacitus, a competent and serious author and one of the most reliable. Tacitus, if you recall, is one of the people that wrote about Christ on the Roman side. This will not be considered particular in view of what the same people had previously done at the death of Julius Caesar, who had swept away their laws and their liberty, and whose character, it seems to me, there was nothing worthwhile, for his very liberality. Let's see here. His very liberality, which is so highly praised, was more baneful than the cruelest tyrant who ever existed, because it was actually the poisonous amiability of his that sweetened servitude for the Roman people. After his death, that people, still preserving on their palates the flavor of his banquet, and in their minds the memory of his prodigality. It's saying prodigal, but it's the stinking the alities that's screwing me up today, guys. I think it's the lack of sleep too. Not that I'm super underslept, but an excessive or an exaggerated spending.
Prodigality.
Prodigality, yeah. Shelley said, thanks for the advice. I appreciate, yeah, anytime. If I can help with anyone. I would just, Shelley, I seriously just go look up stuff. Go read some literature on dyslexia. You can find some videos on YouTube. By the way, a lot of dyslexic people are very, very, very successful. Richard Branson, Virgin Mobile, Virgin Records, all that stuff, dyslexic. It can actually, it's actually, in my opinion, an asset. But the real issue is that your brain does not work well on fine-tuned things, and that's okay. This is why I say I thought about it when I was younger, but I'd never be an engineer because it would be too easy for me to just misplace a little number or something. And I'm good at math, but I hate it. It's so tedious for me because I have to really make sure I'm keeping everything in line and together. So most of the time growing up through school, I did it all in my head. And then I get yelled at by my teacher. Why'd you show your work? I don't need to. Well, if you show your work, well, is my answer right? Well, yeah, but I need to I need to figure out how you got there. It doesn't matter how you know how I got there. I got the answer and it is correct. So you don't need to know anything. I did it up here. The end. Anyways, she's quick-witted. Yeah, absolutely. No doubt. So is my daughter, and my daughter had the same thing. And I literally had to sit down, and she was struggling really hard. And at the time, I was still living in Hagerstown and over in Maryland, and the school system there was terrible. It was before I moved down here, and she just was not getting the support in school. So every evening, just her and I. These are your spelling words for the week. We have to do this. I had words posted around the house for every object in the house. If there was a cabinet, the words right there, cabinet. So word association, rote memory. It's a very useful skill. She does the exact same thing. Yep. See. So anyways, veiled with another to pay him homage, they piled up the seats of the forum for the great fire that reduced his body to ashes and later raised a column to him as the father of his people. Such was the inscription on the Capitol. I'm talking about Caesar, Julius Caesar. They did him more honor dead as he was than they had any right to confer upon any man in the world, except perhaps on those who had killed him. Shelley says, I have to make her show her work. The engineer in me can't function without me. Yeah. I mean, I could see that if you're a meticulous type person. I get it. Well, it's like this. When I finally got around to taking college level math a few years back, because I'd taken some remedial courses to kind of refresh myself. Well, the first remedial course I took was right after I got out of the Marine Corps, and it was a book, and it was self-paced. And I just went through the book, and I did it. And I was like, boom, I'm done. 2 weeks later. And my teacher was like, you're done? And I'm like, yeah, I'm done. This is easy. And I'm like, so do I have to show up to class? She's like, nope, just come back for the final. I didn't study at all. I came back for the final, aced it. So I got that weird ability, but showing my work doesn't work out for me. But when I finally took Math 101 just a few years back, I did that as I was going to need that course eventually anyways, but I also did that to get an associate. So it helped me in my PTA program because it's competitive to get in. And in any case, I got everything very easily, but set theory took me a little bit to figure out, only because you're using symbols that I'm not familiar with. But once I understood set theory, I came up with my own method of doing it, which was more efficient than the methods in the book or, whatever else we were being taught. And my instructor, well, that's not how you're supposed to do this, blah, blah, blah. Well, what's the answer? Your way doesn't work for me. My way works. What's more important? That I do it your way that doesn't work for me, or that I get the right answer? There's lots of crying on both sides. I'm hoping that Fiona doesn't have these issues, because my daughter has also inherited my father's poor sleeping habits, and like I said, she's mildly dyslexic, and these are things I don't necessarily wish on people, but we all have our deficiencies. They didn't even neglect these Roman emperors to assume generally the title of tribune of the people, partially because this office was held sacred and inviolable, and also because it had been founded for the defense and protection of the people and enjoy the favor of the state. By this means, they made sure that the populace would trust them completely, as if they merely used the title and did not abuse it. Today, there are some who do not behave very differently. They never undertook an unjust policy, even one of some importance, without prefacing it with some pretty speech concerning public welfare and common good. Does any of this sound familiar? Basically, he's saying this didn't just happen overnight, but they talk about common welfare or public welfare and common good. Is this not exactly what I read to you from Bastiat's to the Law? These themes they're immortal. They just exist. Again, this goes back to the nature of humanity, right? You all know, O Longa, this formula, which they use quite cleverly in certain places. Although for the most part, to be sure, there cannot be cleverness where there is so much impudence. The kings of the Assyrians, and even after them, those of the Medes, showed themselves in public as seldom as possible in order to set up a doubt in the minds of the rabble as to whether they were not in some way more than man, and thereby to encourage people to use their imagination for those things which they cannot judge by sight. Excuse me. Thus, a great many nations who, for a long time, dwelt under the control of the Assyrians became accustomed, with all this mystery, to their own subjugation and submitted the more readily for not knowing what sort of master they had, or scarcely even if they had one, all for them fearing by a report someone else had never seen. The earliest kings of Egypt rarely showed themselves without carrying a cat, or sometimes a branch, or appearing with fire on their heads, masking themselves with these objects and parading like workers of magic. By doing this, they inspired their subjects with reverence and admiration, whereas with people neither too stupid nor too slavish, they would merely have aroused, it seems to me, amusement and laughter. Yep, absolutely. And this is the idea of the God King. I'm still having this debate of sorts with someone over on the Unjustified Memes from the last time Brother Augustine was on, who I guess is an Orthodox. He's been talking to me. I've been commenting back with him, back and forth. I'm still trying to figure out this whole thing with the Orthodox view of monarchy. I don't agree with it. I think it's misplaced, and I've read counter arguments about this, why people have actually left the Orthodox Church because of this, because they feel like that they're stuck back in and they romanticize medieval Byzantium. And whether they do this or not, I don't care. It's not a issue of salvation, but I'm trying to understand where they're coming from on this. For me, I have one king. That's Christ. There is no king outside of that. I'm just here. I'm not a citizen of any actual kingdom. Now the United States government and West Virginia thinks I'm a citizen, but I'm not. But this is a philosophical, metaphysical kind of argument I'm making, right? And they have power over me because they have power and authority, but I do not serve them. I serve God as my king, and I would never wish to prop up any system that would put a tyrant into place, which is why I cannot be pro-monarchy. No, I'm not a democracy either, but there are other ways to organize societies. So it's not really a black or white issue. But, I kept bringing up, well, if God intended the world to be, to have monarchies, and this was the system he wanted, despite what I believe the Bible says, and this is your tradition, then why was Byzantium sacked and destroyed by the Muslim hordes? Why did God allow that to happen? I saw I got a response back today. I didn't get to read it yet, but we'll see what it has to say, because I've asked the question like 5 times and it's been ignored. But I'm not trying to throw shade on them either. I mean, I did find down in Potomac, Maryland, I found a Russian Orthodox church that is about an hour away, so I'm probably going to try to attend here if I can get my butt up early enough in the morning to go. Of course, there's one down in Harrisonburg, but that's a little far for me. I mean, driving an hour alone is far enough, especially the way gas is right now. But, yeah, I just don't understand this mindset, and I'm just wondering if it's a tradition that that um, they're tracing back inappropriately. Another thing is the marriage of church and state, and he was trying to say, no, that didn't happen. Well, sorry, bud, but the Great Schism didn't happen until what, 10th, 11th century, right? So that means that the papacy was in effect and the church was married to the state. So that's not an argument. You're not gonna tell me that never happened. That did happen. You know, if you don't know about the papacy and its approval of kings and queens, and what is it, Shelley? Maybe you can help me out here. The what is it? The donation of Pippin. You probably should go study that. I know the Orthodox have always been kind of independent and separate, but the Catholic Church does not see them that way. And if you guys don't know this, Catholic's just a Latin word for universal. That's all that means. It's just the universal church. And of course, Orthodox is just a word saying, well, that they're traditional. This is the way, not just traditional, but the accepted way of things. It's interesting too because the biblical narrative goes from and Daniel. The biblical narrative talks about the statue of the king Nebuchadnezzar, and part of the prophecy is the splitting of Rome. That is the legs of iron, the waist is iron, and then it goes down into feet of iron and clay mired together. And this has traditionally, from the very beginning of Christianity, always been seen as a prophecy of the splitting of the kingdom. And it's interesting that the churches would split in the East and West as well. So again, when I say all that stuff and I talk to them, I'm like, look, these are my proofs of my beliefs. I just want an honest answer from you. This isn't, I'm not trying to be polemic and having this, like spirited argument or downtrodden your beliefs or anything. But just because the church teaches something doesn't mean that they're teaching what God wants. We know this because this was also a problem, always has been, in the scriptures. And this was the thing that Jesus was addressing to the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the scribes, the religious leaders of his day. He was saying, you guys are a burden to the people. You require all of these things. They're not even there. Another interesting thing is there's a synod that I was reading about, a synod that is an order from the church. I forget when it was. I think it's 3rd century. And I can't remember what synod it is, but it actually forbids the worship of Easter before a certain date. It forbids it and suggests excommunication for doing such a thing. Now that's insane to me. And one of the first big issues was the issue over when you worship Easter. Is it Paschal? Do you do it on the traditional Jewish holiday? Because Christianity is a Jewish-based religion. And at least originally, right, should still have part of those Jewish roots. I mean, you can't really understand it if you don't have some understanding of the Jewish roots of it. Or is it moved to the Roman date? Well, the church in the West, very early on, between the East and the West, were having these debates. And there's actually a letter from Polycarp addressing this. Polycarp, who was John the Apostle's disciple. He was the bishop of Smyrna. Smyrna, the church in the book of Revelations, which God loved, he found no fault in. So, again, just questions, but I'm way too logical. Ortho means straight. There you go. They're the straight church. I was asking you though, Shelley, about the donation of Pepin. So, but that I remembered what it was. So again, it's hard to say, but I didn't mean to go off on this whole big tangent. But like I said, today's a rabbit hole show, I suppose. I hope you guys don't mind. Let me see if I have any chat elsewhere real quick. All right, we're good. But yeah, anyways, I very much am just interested in these beliefs. And one of the things that appeals to me to Orthodox Christianity, of course, is that they do have a succession of the apostolic line and a lot of the ancient teachings and things. So another thing is just the reverence that goes on, because they sing and chant during their liturgy and services to basically bring you to a spiritual state. And I really despise modern Christianity with all the Hillsong nonsense where, we're singing all these happy songs that aren't even biblical. They're not even based in biblical principles. The best hymns for me growing up are always the ones written by Charles Wesley, because the Methodist Church is basically an Orthodox church. They just are Protestant Orthodox. But those hymns are amazing. Or, the scripture Amazing Grace, that guy was a slave trader who wrote that. I can't recall his name. But he was a slave trader. He knew that he was an evil man. So he knew that he was such an evil man that all he could do was feel guilt in his heart that he had been a slave trader, and that God forgave him for being such a wicked person, and could write such a beautiful song as Amazing Grace. So, you have that. Shelley says, you can't rely on me for historical help. I'm terrible at memorizing details. Good at seeing patterns and how to use knowledge. Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I'm kind of cursed with a memory, though. A memory that remembers too many things and too many details. Sometimes. Anyways, by doing this, they inspired their subjects with reverence and admiration, whereas people neither too stupid. Yeah, I already read that. It is pitiful to review the list of devices that early despots used to establish their tyranny, to discover how many little tricks they employed, always finding the populace conveniently gullible, readily caught in the net as soon as it was spread. Indeed, they always fooled their victims so easily that while mocking them, they enslaved them the more. What comment can I make concerning another fine counterfeit that ancient peoples accepted as true money? Ooh, now we're talking about fiat currency. Fiat currency, folks, is a very old thing. They believe firmly that the great toe of Papyrus, king of Epirus, performed miracles and cured diseases of the spleen. They even enhanced the tale further with the legend that this toe, after the corpse had been buried, was found among the ashes, untouched by the fire. In this wise, a foolish people itself invests lies and then believes them. Many men have recounted such things, but in such a way that it is easy to see that the parts were pieced together from idle gossip of the city and silly reports from the rabble. When Vespasian returned from Assyria, passes through Alexandria on his way to Rome to take possession of the empire, he performs wonders. He makes the crippled straight, restores sight in the blind, and does many other fine things, concerning which the credulous and undiscriminating were, in my opinion, more blind than those cured. Tyrants themselves have wondered that men could endure the persecution of a single man. They've insisted on using religion for their own protection, and where possible have borrowed a stray bit of divinity to boost up their evil ways. And again, this goes back to exactly what I was just talking about. When you're versed with Scripture and you get in these conversations with people, they're like, well, who are much into tradition, and I think that's important too. I think that tradition is important. I'm not a sola scriptura individual. I think that's silliness. You can't operate that way. You just can't. If you don't have a historical context for the scriptures, then you're just not going to understand them because you're a modern person. And these were written by people who lived a long time ago and did not think the way that you do today. So it's very important to understand that. And then also to bring it forward to our time to understand the principles there. But yeah, this is the stuff I'm talking about there when I talk about the monarchy deal. It's like the first individual in the Bible who is named as a king, basically, or at least by tradition, is Nimrod. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord, it says. But that before is traditionally interpreted as also against the Lord. He hunted against him. He's often referred to as the first king of Babylon and the Tower of Babel. And if you go through the scriptures, you see that over and over and over again. When I've been told the first Samuel argument's weak. Is it? I don't think so. But we go throughout the Bible, we see that these kings, always given honor, kings of other nations. I'm not suggesting that we be rebellious or anything either. But these kings are, they're worldly and they worship other deities, and Israel falls into this. But the king of Israel, the promise to David, if you go read 2 Samuel, the promise to David is a prophecy of Christ, that his lineage and his line will bring about a king forever. It's not talking about, did that happen? No, not in the worldly sense. This prophecy was given to Daniel that his line of his kingdom would last forever. Yet Daniel has his children, murdering each other. One of his children raped his sister. There's some bad stuff there, guys. I don't think that, I'm not saying that Daniel wasn't a good man in his youth. There was a lot of things that God allowed back then too, because the world was so savage. But just because he was a good man in his youth doesn't mean he was always a good man or a good king. And we know Solomon became a wicked king eventually. Most of the kings of Israel were not any good, because the only king of Israel, and anyone who's in the church is of Israel, folks, not in the way that we think about it today, but you're part of the tribe of Israel through the promise of Abraham in the circumcision of your heart, as Paul would put it. So we can see all those lines, and they're incompetent kings and kings worshiping wicked pagan idols, gods, whatever. And then you have the Roman Empire and all the terrible things that the kings and folks went after. And again, like I said, as far as I'm concerned, the only king is Christ. But maybe someone will get through to me one day and I'll be a monarchist, but I doubt it. Tyrants themselves have wondered that men could endure the protection of a single man. They have insisted on using religion for their own protection, and where possible have borrowed a stray bit of divinity to bolster up their evil ways. I know, that was the other thing I wanted to address. In the book of Revelations, it's clearly talking about kingdoms. And it's interesting, the 7 churches of Asia there, only 2 of them, Smyrna and Philadelphia, are praised by God. The rest of them, he disciplines. And he's like, come back to your first love. The disciples, out of the 12 original disciples who became the apostles, right? Judas betrayed Christ. These were the people closest to God. This is important for us, folks who are in the faith, to understand this, that even those in the inner circle, spiritual leaders, are not always correct. So I always go back to Christ. Everything for me always comes back to Christ. It doesn't matter what teacher taught what. In the end, I come back to Christ and his simple words. And I always come back, generally speaking, to the Sermon on the Mount. If I had nothing else of the Bible, I would want the Sermon on the Mount. Why? Because God came to man on the Mount and gave him the law like he did in Exodus, and then repeated again in Deuteronomy. But that repetition again is given the law before they entered the promised land. But in Exodus, Moses goes up to the mountain to give the people the law that God wrote with his own hands, and Christ is reenacting that from the Sermon on the Mount. So live by those principles. That's the way I look at it. Go back to those things. If we are to believe that Sibyl of Virgil Salmoneus in tournament for having paraded as Jupiter in order to deceive the populace now atones in nethermost hell. Okay, so here's a little poem. I'm probably going to stop after this portion, guys, and we'll play a little video, and I'm going to read some of the I probably just go right to the Naked Communist. I'll probably play the video at the end if you guys want to see some of that stuff, because I need to do some grocery shopping this evening. Says he suffered endless torment for having dared to intimate the thunderbolts or intimidate. No. What is that word? This is probably the best stream I've ever done, guys.
Imitate.
Okay, thank you. The thunderbolts of heaven and flames of Jupiter upon a chariot drawn by 4 chargers he went unsteadily, riding aloft in his first and great shining torch among the Greeks and into the marketplace. In the heart of the city of Elis he had ridden boldly, and displaying thus his vainglory, he assumed an honor which undeniably belonged to the gods alone. This fool who imitated storm and the the inimitable thunderbolt. Let's see if I said that right.
Inimitable.
Aha. Isn't that like onomatopoeia or something? Anyways. Thunderbolt by clash of brass and with this dizzying charge, the horn-hoofed steeds an all-powerful father beheld, hurled not from a waxen taper with its smoky fumes, but by the furious blast of thunder and lightning he brought him low, his heels above his